one of the interesting things about CEO coaching is most CEOs believe in coaching, but they want to hire a coach for their team and not themselves. So they're willing to spend money on coaching, but not on themselves, because they're just like, hardwired, to be, cheap and cost effective and reinvest in their business. So
welcome to Success Leaves Clues, the podcast where we interview business owners on how they built their businesses and the hard lessons they learned along the way. My name is David Wynn, and I'm a business coach and the founder of Purple Circle, where we help business owners achieve their first 6-figure, 7-figure, and 8-figure year, all without sacrificing their quality of life. Before becoming a business coach and before founding Purple Circle, I started and scaled several 7- and 8-figure coaching businesses, and have been a consultant at several businesses doing over $100 million each, including some that are publicly listed and doing over $1 billion each. In every episode of the podcast, you're going to learn lessons that took our guests years to learn, and you'll be able to learn that in minutes. No matter if you're a new business owner or an established business owner, every episode is going to give you the clues in order to elevate your business.
Welcome to Success Leaves Clues podcast. I'm Pedro, and today I'm joined by Richard Jalichandra, who is a CEO coach, formerly a 6-time venture and private equity-backed CEO. And I'm happily and enjoying introducing you to RJ as RJ, right? So welcome to the show, man. Happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Pedro. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to record with you from the time we met, right? And RJ, I'm kind of a comic book nerd myself, right? So I love the first editions, the origin story, that type of stuff. Now, I got to ask you, right? Let's rewind a bit, because every coach has that moment when they look at their life and say, yeah, I guess this is what I'm doing now, right? So when was that for you, RJ?
Well, the current incarnation is I retired 4 years ago, and I did nothing for a year. And then a neighbor of mine who runs an entrepreneur community, we were having margaritas in my pool one late summer afternoon, and he's like, "Dude, are you just going to do nothing? There's a lot of people that would love your experience and expertise and wisdom, whatever, that are in my community. Would you like to come in and run some masterminds for me?" And so that's how I did it. I've done a little bit of coaching for off and on. When I was even an operating CEO, I did a little bit of coaching on the side, but it was definitely more side hustle and only occasional. But then I started doing some masterminds, and the next thing I know, I start picking up clients. And over the last 3 years, I've worked with over 80 CEOs and founders, helping them figure out how to grow their business towards an exit.
Okay, let's draw a timeline here. I know we were talking before the podcast that you started coaching 20 years ago, right? And then part-time, right? And then 3 years ago as a full-time gig, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, full-time-ish, because I am also trying to be a little bit semi-retired.
Okay. Trying to be semi-retired. That's funny. Okay. Now walk me through. Let me understand the conversation about margaritas, right? When was that?
That would have been in 2023.
Okay. Now, why would you come from retirement to impact more people? I don't understand the why behind it.
Well, that's a great question. And I'll tell you what, after a year of doing nothing, I was totally miserable. And that's one of the things, another one of my side hustles these days is I also YouTube about retirement. And one of the most common things that people realize when they retire, you work, 30, 40 years, always thinking that I can't wait to do nothing. And then when you get to nothing, it's like, well, wait a second, I'm going to live another 20, 30 years. I can't just sit around doing nothing, and my brain is going to be fried and, whatever. And you can't sit around your pool just drinking margaritas all the time. So it was the right time. I really needed to find something to do in retirement. And I can't think of a better way to do it, because one of the things that you get in retirement is you have a loss of identity and a loss of purpose. But being able to actually kind of put my CEO hat on and help other younger entrepreneurs, I can't even tell you just how energizing and how much that, keeps my brain fresh and gives me that intention and purpose. And it also feels great to just help young entrepreneurs, not always young entrepreneurs. I've actually had one client that was older than me, but most of the time they're younger, and it really feels great to be able to help somebody see things in their business that can give them, daylight and new ideas and stuff.
I feel the need to dig in a little deeper, okay, about the
Dig away.
retirement stuff. Here's the catch, right? A lot of coaches out there pivot or eventually move to retirement and treat coaching as a hobby, even just to keep fresh. Let me ask you this: is this back to the game venture 3 years ago, right? Is this more of a hobby for you? Are you definitely inclined to impact more people, help the younger generation? How does that look like for you, RJ?
Well, when my neighbor asked me to do a couple of masterminds for him, it was literally just like, hey, I'm going to try this out. And I really enjoyed it. The first time I was like, oh my God, these people are just eating up everything I say. And, and I could see it because I was in their chair, 20 years before or 30 years before in some cases, where I remember my first CEO gig, I had no idea what the hell I was doing. And so just being able to feel useful was really intoxicating. I did not jump into it full time though. Probably for another year. I kind of just did it part time, but I was starting to feel good. And then after a while, I was like, hey, maybe I should actually go out and try and get some clients versus just all the referrals I was getting. And so that happened after about a year, and I've been doing it pretty seriously for 2 years. As I said, I've worked with over 80 CEOs and founders, so that's quite a few if you add it all up and even stretch it across 3 years. And sometimes it's a quick engagement, sometimes it's a long engagement. I've got a couple clients I've been working with for over 2 years. So it really depends on kind of what the CEO or founder needs and all that. But yeah, I kind of it's funny, when I retired, you'll appreciate this too. When I retired, I paid myself a salary. I'd put all my retirement money. I had a nice trust set up, and I had paychecks coming every 2 weeks like I was still working. And in January of 25, I stopped paying myself because I was making enough in coaching where I didn't need it, but I also wanted to treat myself like a startup. So I stopped paying myself, and I said, I'm going to make coaching kind of be the thing that lets me go for a while until I want to pull it back again and maybe take some more time off. So I'm enjoying it. Totally love it.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so it sounds like to me that you're serving in a way past RJ, right? Past self. Like you're helping CEOs that when are going through the same stuff you went some time ago, and now you're just helping them to avoid the pitfalls, something like that.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes the way to think about coaching though is you think about any top performer in anything, whether it's sports, the arts, literally anything, even academics and stuff. Everybody's got a coach. And if you really think about it, like somebody like LeBron James, people say he's the best basketball player of all time. Do you know how many private coaches he has beyond the team coaches? He has 6 private coaches in addition to the team coaches. So everybody can use a little bit of, help. And I certainly enjoyed it when I was a CEO as well, having somebody that could just literally kind of, help you point out your blind spots or work on your weaknesses. Or, sometimes, a lot of times you just, even, stuff, but you kind of forget the fundamentals because you start, it's very common, like in sports in particular, people know how to do something and then they start shortcutting it. They start going straight to the answer instead of doing the process. Mm-hmm. And so that's what a lot of times as a CEO coach, sometimes I'm really, giving advice, and a lot of times I'm just fine tuning kind of like what they already know.
Okay. I mean, I was born in 86, right? So Michael Jordan is the GOAT, by the way, in my opinion, right? I can accept the challenge about LeBron, but okay. Now, moving forward, if you had to define, right, who do you serve right now? Who would you say? I'm not sure if there's a demographic. I know we established with CEOs and startups and all that, but who would you say, like, I serve these type of people? Who are they?
As I said, they're all entrepreneurs. Occasionally I work with co-founders, so I'll help people get aligned, in their partnerships. It's funny enough, I've actually, of all my engagements, I've done 9, what I'll call co-founder marriage counseling. where they're actually having problems, almost like, and they're basically like trying to get either aligned, or in two of those cases, they were actually looking for a way to actually divorce in a productive way that didn't kill the company. So, but that's not the norm. The norm is usually just a CEO, founder, or co-founders that they're legitimately just trying to grow their business and they want to get better at the job they're doing. And the way to grow the business is to help the CEO, founder, or other leaders on the team just get better at what they do and raise their ceiling. So that's most of what I do.
Okay. Now let's pretend, RJ, I am your ICP or ideal client profile in this scenario. Okay. So first of all, how would I be able to find you, like marketing wise?
I'm terrible at marketing. I've built my business completely word of mouth and referral. I do a little bit. In the past, I've done a little bit of LinkedIn outreach, and I probably start that back up again at some point. But I've been terrible at doing outreach simply because I've had enough business come to me. But now I'm kind of wanting to ramp it up a little bit more, just get some bigger and better clients and all that. So far I've been very fortunate. Let's put it that way.
Okay. I'm still that guy. Okay. In the scenario, I'm still your potential client. Let's say I was referred to you, right? People told me, hey, you got to talk to RJ. He's pretty cool. I reach out. Okay. So I'm an inbound lead. Let's put it like that. I'm like, hey man, how does it look like to work with you? Right. We go through the sales process, however that looks like. I understand there has to be alignment. We can speed up that a little bit. You understand you can help me. I understand you can help me too. How does it look like to work with you, RJ? And what are the potential outcomes I can expect out of it?
Well, before we even get to that, let me tell you what I do the first time I talk to somebody. I tell somebody what my philosophy is about being a CEO and growing as a CEO and being a great CEO. And it's a simple thing, and I give it away for free, happily give it away for free the first time we meet. So you can kind of like taste it, test it, try it, see what the flavor is, all that. And if you didn't get enough there, I also have a 2.5 hour video online on YouTube that basically goes into a lot more detail. But the simple message is this: a CEO, really, their number one objective should be to become a do no work CEO. And that basically means that you've gotten yourself completely out of the day to day, and you've got the people, systems, and processes in place where you are vast majority of your time is totally free to just focus on the growth of the company and mentoring and leading and coaching your own team. So vast majority of people I work with, they are far from a do no work CEO. And so that's the first framework that I do. Everybody needs something different, but that's one of the core tenets of what I do is I work with the CEOs and co-founders and founders and whatever, where I map out a plan for them to become, if it's not 100% do no work, we're trying to get to at least a 50% percentage of do no work, because a company will not grow at its optimal rate unless you're at least a 50% do no work CEO, where you're out of the day-to-day and you're basically thinking about, how do I grow this beyond the incremental growth and looking for the transformational growth. And that could be like new products, new markets, acquisitions, big ideas versus just like, oh, we're going to increase our sales 10%, a year or something like that. So that's the core of what I do. And then the next thing I do is every engagement is totally bespoke. Everybody needs something different. Literally every CEO needs something completely different. So then I basically work with a CEO and just kind of map out what is it they want to work on outside of that one thing that I do as the foundation of everything we're going to do together. And that's become a do no work CEO.
Do no work CEO. Interesting. So they can sip on margaritas and then become a coach the other day. Just like you did, right? I'm fun. I'm just messing with you.
Well, it was pretty easy for me because as you said in the introduction, I was a 6-time venture and private equity backed CEO. Yes. And I would get hired by investors to come in and basically figure out a company and sell it within 2 to 3 years. So you had to get very good at the process of being a CEO. And a big tenet of that was you're not really doing a good job as a CEO until you become a certain percentage of do no work, which basically means the company can scale and grow without you.
Perfect. No, makes perfect sense. Now, I'm curious about one thing, the structure, right? Is it mainly one-on-one? Do we have a one-to-many component? You mentioned a video, so there's some framework, some online processes. How does that look like?
Well, I used to do group coaching. I don't do group coaching anymore. I strongly prefer working one-on-one with somebody. I definitely love your group coaching too, but the core of my practice is really one-on-one coaching. Sometimes, as I said, I work with co-founders, so I'll meet with 2 co-founders and sometimes occasionally 3 co-founders, and we'll have sessions, as a group, and then sometimes we'll break off into one-on-ones. But most of my work is done one-on-one with people. And occasionally I will have a client ask me to coach one of their executives on their team as well.
Okay. Now let's pretend I'm still that guy. Okay.
Okay.
And you're a potential client, and I am a co-founder. We're having trouble, right? Like you mentioned, the marriage counseling stuff and how you navigate that. So how would you navigate that type of situation? I'm curious about how you step in and you kind of help them solve or understand where they're at, and what this could potentially damage the business, and how can we solve that?
Well, there's a couple of things you do. The first thing you want to do is find out, what are you trying to achieve with the business? If you can kind of get everybody focused back on the business itself, sometimes you can get past the personality things. And then of course you get into, where are we butting heads? Where are we not agreeing? A lot of times it's on strategic direction or whatever, and then we can talk through that and all that. And this is not just with co-founders, this is with anybody. After, they've got my pitch and they know that I'm going to try and train them to be a do no work CEO, what we really get at is, what are you trying to achieve? And most people are saying, hey, I want to grow and eventually get to an exit. Even if they have an exit that's 20 years off, it's still out there. And what you're trying to do is, okay, well, how do we plan to get from here to there? So a lot of what I do too is I get do a lot of work in strategic planning and teach people how to strategic plan. That's one thing that you get working with institutional investors, is they demand a strategic plan, which is a combination of things. They want to see a verbal articulation of it in some sort of slide deck, and then they want to see a numerical or quantitative expression of that strategy in a financial model. So I do work a lot with CEOs, individual founders, co-founders. That's always the tenet of it. It's like, what are you trying to achieve? And do we actually have a plan to get from point A to point B? And the vast majority of people, when you sit down with them, you say, what's your 3-year plan? They go, oh, well, we just want to grow by 20% a year or 30%. And I'm like, well, how are you going to do it? Where's your plan? So that's another part of what I'll do, is I'll sit down with them and I'll actually make them map things out, and do homework, so to speak, as kind of like a school marm, cracking the whip and saying, you got to have a plan, because how are you going to get your whole team on that if they don't know what the plan is?
Does the conversation sometimes move to a different direction rather than just revenue, like impact or trying to create something meaningful? Or is it just mainly revenue-wise, the talk?
Well, look, I said every engagement is different. Everybody has different needs and whatnot. But generally, the most common thing is around the business itself and how do you grow it. There's lots of reasons that people hire me. I get, one of the most common things is somebody's kind of like got a little bit of escape velocity, but they're kind of at their natural ceiling of where, not just themselves, but their whole team. And so a lot of people are like, well, how do I hire an executive team? Because, especially if you bootstrapped a business, and you could even be doing, 7-8 figures, but you bootstrapped it. You've done everything on your own. The time it comes to hire an expensive multiple 6-figure, executive, they basically want to cough up a lung when they understand how much it's going to cost, and they get nervous about, like, how do I actually build an exec team? So I get involved a lot in helping people map out kind of what their people needs are going to be as well. Because if you ask me, I've grown a lot of businesses, and you ask me, how did I grow the businesses? I'm like, I hired really good people, and that's it. I mean, hired and managed great people, and then get the heck out of their way, which goes right back to the do no work CEO. It's like, how do you, I've taken 2 companies from 0 to 8 figures in really short periods of time. And everybody said, well, how did you do that? Well, I hired executive teams that already had done it. And so that's a lot of what I'll end up doing with clients is not just working on their strategy, but part of their strategy is like, okay, well then who's my executive leadership team? Who's going to make that plan happen? Because, the bigger you get, you can't do it on your own.
Okay, interesting. I gotta ask you something. You mentioned multiple times the do no work CEO, right? And when we're looking at your current stage, you're getting out of retirement, right? And doing this almost sounds like a passion project too. But do you see yourself trying to not be so involved in the operations, sort of a do no work CEO in this coaching practice? Like you're involved heavily in the one-on-ones, right? The one-to-many, the group coaching, something you distance yourself from. Do you see yourself training a coach, licensing, trying to step out a little bit of the weeds and actually run as a do no work CEO?
Well, I absolutely can see some of my clients when they get a little bit further along and they sell their businesses. I can see some of them becoming coaches as well, because the do no work CEO paradigm works so well, because basically to get to any percentage of do no work, like I said, it gets back to you means you're putting people, systems and processes in place. And so it's just a super helpful framework. And a lot of people love that. So I 100% could teach people to work with people on that, but that's not necessarily part of my plan right now. I just am enjoying working with people and helping them grow their businesses and in some cases achieve their dreams.
It just so happens it's yours too, right? To help them. That's your true intention, it sounds like. Now, I'm curious about future, shifting gears for a second, right? Where are you taking all this? Looking ahead, where do you see the business going, RJ?
I'm just going to keep coaching, and but I've enjoyed it so much that I think I can handle a lot more. As when I started this, I was thinking about doing it part-time, and then it kind of turned into a little bit more of a part-time than part-time. And so now I'm kind of running it like its own business, and which is why I said now it's time to probably start doing some outreach again and do some networking beyond just what comes to me.
Okay. And of course, whenever we're aiming towards the next chapter, always something we're refining in the present, right? And you mentioned marketing, you mentioned some stuff, but what are you currently trying to improve or tighten up in your business right now?
Probably the most important things I can do is just getting in front of more people. And that could be done via online methods of just being introduced to people. But really, I also plan to do a lot more just in-person networking. One of the interesting things about CEO coaching is most CEOs believe in coaching, but they want to hire a coach for their team and not themselves. So they're willing to spend money on coaching, but not on themselves, because they're just like, hardwired, to be, cheap and cost effective and reinvest in their business. So the in-person or just even live conversation is really important to get somebody to basically spend the money on themselves. And, I'm not cheap. I'll say that right up front. I'm not cheap. So like for somebody to get them to invest in themselves, you almost have to have that personal live conversation. And like I said, it could be done like this on a Zoom call, or it could be done going to a conference or, the local Chamber of Commerce business lunch or, whatever it is. And I kind of realized that I just need to kind of get out there a little bit more and network. One of the things that, at the end of a career, I'll also point out my career, I started off in sales and business development and marketing. So I was always out there. And when I stopped working, I was like, the last thing I want to do is more outreach. I don't care if I ever sell another thing as long as I live, or, do another sales pitch. And of course, the reality is if I want to do what I have to do here, you have to get out and meet people and all that. And so I kind of come out of my shell after literally turning it off and then kind of getting into it begrudgingly because people were asking me for help. now I'm wanting to be outward again and get out there and make a little bit of a name for myself again in this new career.
Interesting. You sparked my curiosity about one thing. You mentioned the CEOs. Sometimes they don't hire coaches for themselves, but for the team, and that friction that can exist. So I'm curious about one thing, right? Have you ever been to a company that the CEO brings you in and tells you something like this? You know what? My team is a problem. They're not performing. They're underperforming. Whatever. Then you hop on and you realize leadership is the problem. That CEO is the problem, right? The guy who is also a paying customer. So if that happened, not sure if it did, but how would you navigate that conversation?
Well, one of the great things about being semi-retired is you maybe heard the expression, I have no F's left to give. F being short for a French word. I don't care. I don't need to do this. I like doing it. And if somebody wants my help, great. If they don't, that's no problem either. Have a great life. I want everybody to be happy, myself included. And trust me, I get to the point where at least twice in the last 3 years, I've fired clients because I was like, you're not listening and you're not getting any value out of my thing. And if you're not getting value, then I'm not getting value. So what are we doing? And they were happy to keep paying me. And I was just like, I don't want your money because it's not enjoyable for you. It's not enjoyable for me. So most of the time I have no problem telling somebody like, you're the problem. And here's how we're going to work on that. And invariably, I will say this, even the most elite CEOs I work with, the best CEOs, they're usually the best clients because they want you to tell them like, dude, you suck, or that was a bad decision, or, or try something else, or, usually where you have problems is people when they're insecure and they don't want that feedback. And then I'll give them that feedback.
Right. I love it. Okay. Now, I want to tap into your experience for a second because people listening can really benefit from this. We will have CEOs, and not just that. We have the coaches who are also CEOs, right? And you've been in the game long enough to hear all kinds of business advice. Some are good, some are terrible, right? So what's one piece of business advice, RJ, you hear all the time that you think, that's overrated or misunderstood even?
Probably, I'll be careful with my words here. I was going to
Don't. Please do it.
I think one of the silliest things I hear people say, silly being a more friendly term, is that when I hear a leader say, we only hire A players here. And I'm like, oh, really? You only hire A players? And when you look at the normal curve of distribution in society, only 6% of people are A players. 58% are C players. And so basically one of the things I coach is do not think you have A players. You will have your company's success is going to be based on B and C players. And how do you build the systems and processes around that make C players really successful? Remember, C is not bad. C means you're passing. You're doing your job. And so you have very few A players in an organization. So it's really important to just have that recognition that your company's success is going to be on how well you manage B and C players. A players don't need your help. The B and C players need your help. And then how do you take a C minus player to a C plus? And how do you take a C plus to a B minus? And that's developing your people. That's also developing the systems around them so that there's less chance for them to make mistakes and more chances for them to succeed. And so that's probably like the one thing I always love, like, I immediately slap somebody and say, stop saying that, because there are a few companies, there's a few companies like, Google or something like that, where they can literally afford to go out and give people IQ tests and hire nothing but A players. Most organizations, they succeed on C players with a smattering of Bs, and then you might have one or two hero A players. And you can have an incredibly successful business working with nothing but C players. I mean, if you want to just think of some of the most successful fast food restaurants, there's nothing, the people working on, behind the griddle and the counter, they're C players at that point in their life or whatever. And yet you have these very successful large scale restaurant organizations. That's the best example I can give you of why, how you can make C players make a great business.
Yeah, like it brings me back to McDonald's, right? Great system. So they can get a C player to work there like that. So it's not just about the people, the individual, it's also about the systems in place, right?
Yep.
And how you can control
training,
that, and you can
all the things. Yeah.
Okay.
And so and the reason it's so important for people to understand that is they just assume that they're going to be able to go out and find A players. And I'm like, when I talk to people, like they give me their budget for a position and they say, I want an A player. I'm like, wait, that's not an A player budget. Because the A players, they get paid really well. And if you want an A player, I'm like, I'm just telling you, you can't afford it. So what are you going to do? And so that's when you got to go down and say, all right, let's stack rank these people and say, all right, this is a really solid B player that can do the job if I give them these things in place. And it could be coaching, it could be training, it could be, the right software program, or, whatever it is that makes that person successful.
There's another classic one, right? Which is nobody wants to work. Yeah, at that salary range, maybe no, right? And they always talk sometimes about the external factor, not about the stuff they can actually solve it, right? So there's that too. Now, I'm curious, on the other side, what's a piece of advice you wish more people actually took seriously? A boring one.
Well, it's related again to people, because organizations are, they grow and succeed based on the people you bring in, and I constantly find people that are unwilling to invest what they need in having the right people. And I'll give you a great example. So this comes up all the time. I'll be approached by some entrepreneur. He's doing great. Maybe got a business to $5 million on his own or her own. Goes both ways. And they're going, hey, I want to get to $10 million. Can you help me get to $10 million? And I'll ask a really simple question. How many people on your team have ever worked in a $10 million company? And they're like, nobody. And I'm like, well, who's the highest paid person on your staff? And they're like, okay, they'll put out a number and it's really low. And I'm like, well, that was good enough to get you to 5 million. But if you're going to go to 10 or 25, you need people who, you don't have to have a whole team, but you have to have a handful of people, 1 or 2 people, particularly on your leadership team, who've actually been at a bigger company and know the systems and processes and just the things that have to happen to be at that scale. And so that's a super common one. And again, it goes all the way up to, same thing. I work with a $25 million company and they want to get to 100. It's like, do you have anybody at your company? One person. Just one person on your leadership team that worked at a $100 million company. If not, you probably need to go get one. And then they're kind of like, and by the way, I've made all these same mistakes. So let me be really clear about that. I was a 6-time CEO. I made a lot of the same mistakes that I'm calling out here. And it's like, I'll give you an example from my thing. I wanted to hire a chief revenue officer, and I just had it in my mind that there's a certain price tag. And I was like, I need to do that. And my CFO finally tapped me on the shoulder. He's like, dude, that ain't enough. You're not going to get the person you want at that price. Reset your budget. And you kind of it goes to the old saying, you get what you pay for. And sometimes in key positions, you need to overinvest in people with compensation.
Would you say they have to be in the same industry?
It depends on what industry you're in and what role they're doing. So I think this gets asked to me all the time, like at the CEO level, do you need somebody with industry experience? You can make a really strong argument that somebody needs to be from that industry. But I can tell you, I took over from founders and I ran the businesses better than they did. And I had no experience in any of the industries, but I was also kind of a professional executive. So I didn't know about the industry, but I knew about how to run a company and how to grow a company. So that works at a senior level. I think sometimes you do have to have people that are, industry specific, have a domain expertise. But again, when you do find the proverbial A player, you could take an A player out of any industry and drop them into another industry and they're going to do fine, just because they have a high sense of achievement. And one of the ways they get the high sense of achievement is they learn stuff. They know how to learn. They know how to learn. They know how to pick things up quick. They know how to work hard and all that. And you can achieve the same thing with a lot of B players as well.
Okay. Love that. Interesting. Now, if someone listening wants to connect with you or follow your work, RJ, and we're going to have all the links in the description here, but what's the best way for people to find you and connect with you?
Really easy. LinkedIn. There's only one Jalichandra family on the planet, and I'm the one on LinkedIn. So if you want to get me on LinkedIn, you can get me there. You can also go to my website, which is inclinecapital.net. That's kind of my personal website, but people reach out to me from both, and I'm not that hard to find.
Okay. Few moments from this chat today that really stood out to me. Let's start with the origin story, right? You're with your buddy and you're like, are you just going to do nothing? and to sipping margaritas and later down, I kind of had to dig in a little bit. You told me you were feeling totally miserable for not doing anything. And I can resonate with that partially, right? Had been in my 20s when I left banking and I had like a huge sum of money and I was like doing nothing for a year and I felt miserable. I had to do something about my life, it's that sense of achievement. I don't know what it is actually, but to a point, I always remember this Jim Carrey quote, which is something like, I'm going to butcher it, but it's something like, I wish people experience what it is to reach to a certain level, that they will understand that that's not the answer. Something like that.
I saw that him give that interview, and that's a 100% right. And you paraphrased it, and it's like when you finally get there, it's not about. It's one of the cliches. The other way to say it is, it's not the end point; it's the process to get there. And that's kind of like what I'm enjoying now about coaching. You asked me where am I taking it? It's like, well, I don't really need to take it anywhere because I am retired, whatever, but I'm enjoying the whole process of doing it. I love the human connection and the ability to help somebody and just get better. It's super fulfilling to me.
Yeah. And also, I think about the honesty part. You're blunt honest, right? You're telling me you're terrible at marketing. You're telling me you don't care. You just call people out. You're super honest about where you want to take this, right? You're not trying to play someone you're not. At the end of the day, man, I think everyone should be like that, like in a day-to-day basis, not just because you're kind of, settled, but because I can be dead tomorrow, right? I don't know, right? I'm just going to do my thing, man, and hope for the best and keep being me. At least this is my way of doing things. Now, This is just my long-winded way of saying, RJ, I appreciate what you do, man. I appreciate you being here and sharing so openly today, okay? It was great having you on.
Awesome. Well, I enjoyed being here, and it's great to connect, and hopefully somebody gets some value out of it.
That's it for this episode. This episode, as well as this podcast, was brought to you by Purple Circle, where we help business owners elevate their business to 6, 7, and 8-figure years, all without burning out. If you're looking to grow your business, as well as get the time freedom that you are looking for, visit us at joinpurplecircle.com and see what we can do to help you and your business.